This is cool. All right, you guys fire ahead.
I'm Wes Tiemann, and I'm a beef pro.
I'm Brett Spader, and I'm a beef pro.
You tell me. I'm hearing my own voice, which makes me nauseous.
I'm Dustin Dean, and I'm a beef pro.
I'm Annie Allen, and I'm a beef pro.
Ow now, brown cow.
Hi, I'm Tracy Bruner, and I'm a beef pro.
I'm Jason King, and I'm a beef pro.
I'm Bob Weaber, and I'm a beef pro.
All right, welcome to the Beef Pros podcast. My name is Garrett Thomas. As always, I'm joined by my good buddy Ben Spitzer. Hey, hey. Today we have got a special guest here. Ben, I'm going to let you introduce our guest today and tell us a little bit about him.
Dr. Bob Weaber, K-State. I guess I got to know you through BIF, I believe is how we first made our introduction, and you were not at K-State at that time.
I was probably at Mizzou then.
Yeah, back in the day. Give us a little bit of background on where you grew up, kind of your pedigree, and those type ththings.
Cool. Originally from southern Colorado, grew up southwest of Pueblo towards a little town called Beulah.
I've been through Beulah.
Beulah's a pretty spot. They did have some fire here a couple of years ago, so people out in broader territories might have heard about Beulah. You kind of got to be going there to get there. So
sure.
Yeah, it's not on the way to anywhere.
Definitely one of those places you don't get there by accident.
Right. But my folks had a kind of a diversified farming and cow-calf operation there. Like many folks in that part of the world, we were dryland wheat farmers through the 70s, and the 80s convinced us not to do that anymore. But had a commercial cow-calf operation. My twin brother Dave and I kind of grew a registered Hereford inventory for our junior projects, and stayed connected with the red and whites here for a while. And our kids are back into showing, and so we've got a few Hereford heifers around the place. Did some diversified livestock experience growing up, so we had a flock of ewes that we raised club lambs out of, and that helped pay for part of college. And
we won't hold that against you too long.
Then I milked cows at a neighbor's place for a couple of years, and which turned out to actually be a pretty educational experience for a guy that was eventually going to go into teaching people about cows.
Sure.
So learned a lot there. Undergrad and master's work at Colorado State in Fort Collins.
Go Rams.
Go Rams, that's right. Animal science and ag econ for the undergrad, and worked with Tom Field in the beef industry leadership program for a master's.
Sure.
At the time, that would have been early mid-90s. Vertical coordinated marketing systems and value-based marketing was really kind of just starting, and that was what my interest was. I was really interested in those aspects of the beef value chain. Did an internship at CattleFax as an undergrad, which I learned a lot. You can't be in CattleFax office for 3 months and not learn anything unless you're dead. So
sure.
It was great to work with Randy and the crew there. Probably one of the maybe fundamental experiences in sort of understanding beef value chain, beef marketing that I had growing up, and that was really influential. Left CSU, went to work for Jim Gibb at the American Gelbvieh Association. Worked kind of one of those three-way appointments. So I was youth activities, commercial marketing, and breed improvement. And through a series of exec changes, ended up taking some classes in breeding and genetics at CSU with Rick Borden to kind of bolster my animal breeding background. That was becoming a bigger part of my job. And I got really inspired and interested in genetics, and so I left Gelbvieh in the fall of 2000, started a PhD with John Pollock at Cornell. Worked part-time for Simmental while I was there, so spent 4 years at beautiful Ithaca, New York. My bride Tammy and I got married while I was out there. She's from southeast Montana, grew up in the Hereford business. And, first job was at Mizzou, beef genetics extension, and research appointment there, 7 years. K-State, 6 years now, and cow-calf extension, beef genetics research. So.
Cool. That's pretty cool.
It's gone by fast. That's the thing for the young people out that are listening. You'll be surprised. The older you get, the faster things go, which is You'd think it'd be the other way around, but it's not. And it goes by fast.
I had no idea he was a part of the former Breed Association Workers Association.
Yeah, that's right.
You can be a member. We'll have to get you a membership
I've done
card.
two.
Yeah, we'll get your card.
I've done two, and so I'm out. Right.
You're
So-
twice vaccinated. You're
Right,
good.
right.
No, talking about things getting faster, I was just realizing that the other day. You know, I've probably known you 10 years now. And
Yeah.
it seems like just the other day, I was fresh out of grad school, trying to figure out my way, and showed up to my first
at a
BF.
breed association.
Yeah, I was with Red Angus at that time.
Angus, yeah.
Also
So-
twice vaccinated.
Yeah. Thrice, actually.
But those are thrice.
No, I mean, it is true. It's like yesterday that I was figuring out what I was going to be doing. And now I realize that what I thought I was figuring out to be doing is not at all what I was.
That was really my story too, because my brother Dave, when he first started back to grad school, was actually in animal breeding, and he's the guy that actually ended up working in research director at Cattlefax and is a full-time economist now, right? So it's interesting how your paths can change, and maybe that's a good message too for the young people listening. Go after your dream, but if your dream changes, go after it.
Definitely.
Right? Yeah. Don't get locked in. I think the job and labor data says what people change careers 4 or 5 times now in their life. Finding the perfect job sometimes means leaving the one you got.
Yep.
You got to
absolutely.
step out, be brave.
Tell us. We kind of touched back on those things that you just went over, but I guess tell us a little bit about your involvement with the breed associations. You worked with 2 different ones, obviously in very different roles. But tell us a little bit more about some things that maybe it seems to me, even in my short tenure working for a breed association, I learned a lot in a short amount of time, whether it was dealing with people or how to problem solve or things like that. Why don't you share a little bit about your experience there?
Yeah, so I think you hit on a couple of really important ones. One's, being able to take something that's pretty. I worked mostly in breed improvement at Simmental in particular, but a lot of breed improvement or value-based marketing stuff when I was at Gelfie. Being able to talk to somebody on the phone that's 1,000 miles away, and figure out what their problem is and how to fix it, and being responsive to people that may not be happy with you or your organization, takes some sort of patience and grace, and
People get upset at breed associations.
they surprisingly enough they do, and
That's not my experience.
the other interesting thing is how to oftentimes people are convinced they're not wrong when they are, and being able to sort of help negotiate them through that process of figuring out maybe not just exactly what's wrong or what caused it to be wrong, but how to fix the process and the problem, and in many cases mine were data related issues in terms of contemporary grouping or something, and you never get the phone calls about the bulls EPDs that move the right direction. It's always the bulls that move the unfavorable direction, or
Right.
at least as perceived by the producer, and talking through the time value of money sort of issue of, well, would you rather know that he's a bottom 25% of the breed for milk EPD today, or when you've got 4 sets of daughters in production out of him, right? So,
Right.
kind of working through some of those things, the people interface skills of, you get on the road a lot. You guys have done this, being able to think on your feet and have confidence in what you're saying, and have, a wealth of knowledge and resources that you can push back at the audience to support your position. Takes time, but the value of breed association is, at that time, it was mostly before cell phones were pretty prominent. So you got, a company phone card, right? So you pay phone, company credit card, and the keys to the company van, right? And I mean, literally, you're on the job for 2 weeks, and you got stuff booked and scheduled to go speak at field days or producer meetings, and you got to have your crap together, right?
Yeah.
And so there's no way of preparing more for that than just going and doing it.
Yeah.
The other bits I think are related to at least, and this continues even my extension role, is helping people understand technology and not necessarily just the fun aspects of it, but how do we adopt technology that has a positive return on investment? Because ultimately, the goal of most of us in beef production is it's a profit-oriented business, right? And if we approach it from any other perspective, we get sort of off base. Not everything can be measured with profit, but it's a pretty good proxy for lots of things.
Sure.
And so helping think through decisions that are pragmatic, profitable, is something I really like to do. It's sometimes pretty challenging and hard to put numbers to, but I find many times the mistakes that I make or producers make aren't the really complicated things, because we typically recognize ubiquitously across the population of cow-calf producers or seed stock producers the things that are complicated, right? It's not difficult to identify things that are complicated. Where people make substantial mistakes, and I make mistakes, are our premises and assumptions of basic things that just aren't true, or aren't true anymore. And so being able to step back and evaluate the paradigm and our decision-making platform and how we're coming about that decision, I think is really important, and one that I think our cow-calf producers and seed stock producers sometimes need to be a little more conscious of as we make routine decisions. So sort of not necessarily self-evaluation, but routine evaluation of the assumptions of our business and business plan. And I think that's
good stuff.
Can be valuable, right?
Sure.
So.
And we always jump around. I always say we jump around, so we're going to jump around a little bit.
That's all right.
But your CattleFax experience, how does that play into those experiences that you would have had? It was an internship, right?
Yep.
So how would do those experiences and those relationships, I imagine today, even in your extension role at K-State, play a big part in how you can relate to folks? And
yeah, sure. I think the part of it's just having a really good exposure and knowledge about beef value chain and marketing in that, and fundamental understanding of price seasonality and futures market and all that kind of stuff is really important. As important or more important is the people that work there. And there's a bunch of the people that were there, Dwayne Lenz and Kevin Good and Randy Block are all still there. Mm-hmm. And I see them at NCBA convention and other places. And it's really interesting to maintain those relationships. And Troy Applehans that works there was on staff at Gelbvieh. He was a field man at Gelbvieh when I was there. And,
mm-hmm.
We pick up just like where we left off, and
sure.
It's fun to have those relationships where you can pick up the phone and call and say, hey, what do you know about this or that? And
sure.
It's great. Yeah.
Well, and I guess for those listeners that maybe don't know exactly what CattleFax is or does, can you give us
so CattleFax is it's a cooperative, but it's a cooperative of cow-calf and feedlot cattle producers. So it's a member-driven organization that provides really detailed both supply and demand market data. So market data reporting is a big part of what they do, particularly on the fed cattle side, but kind of growing now into a lot more work with cow-calf producers, particularly big cow-calf producers that are trying to manage kind of futures and basis risk. They've expanded, and I think really interestingly so, into a lot of understanding the competitive meat environment. So pork and poultry analysts, energy analysts, currency analysts. Beef is part of a much bigger sort of set of commodity and currency issues and affected by a lot of those kind of things. And so they've expanded their understanding and knowledge of how those other markets influence the beef market.
Sure,
yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
We've talked a little bit, or get us more current with what your role is now at K-State. I know you've kind of got a few irons in the fire with a few different roles there. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what you do there?
Sure. So about 6 years, it'll be 6 years this coming August. Moved the family from Columbia, Missouri to Manhattan, Kansas. and took a position there in.
How'd you guys adjust to the big city?
Yeah, it was. We actually live in Wamego, so it's even bigger. But we made the transition pretty good. It's the eastern part of Kansas and Flint Hills is really a beautiful part of the world that I'd underappreciated really until we moved there. And we live, like I say, outside Wamego, and great community and tons of stuff for our kids to do. But I moved again. It was in August of 2011. Our youngest kiddo was 2 months old, and so we packed up the belongings. Still owned a house in Missouri that was in 2011. Wasn't exactly the brightest time to be trying to make a swap in the real estate market. And I'm glad to say we kind of held our money together, but took a while to get kind of feet back on the ground at home front and work front. But serve as cow-calf extension specialist is kind of the formal title, I guess, but I probably more generally work in sort of beef systems specialist because I really span my training and real, I guess, expertise is in beef genetics, but sensitivity to a variety of other sort of management issues related to cow-calf production. Cow-calf production, seed stock production is kind of my passion, so I have a tendency to get the lines get pretty fuzzy, and that's one of the nice things about an academic job is you kind of get to do what you want to do. So that's the fun part, right?
Yep.
My appointment's predominantly an extension one, but I do have a research appointment and do most of that work in the area of beef genetics and do like most faculty get sucked into lots of other stuff. So one of the fun parts of my job, Dr. Dan Mosier, when he left K-State and went to Angus, he was the purebred unit faculty coordinator, and so when he left I inherited that job, and it's been a lot of fun. I get to help influence and run about 300 registered cows that the state owns, and we have a bull sale every spring, Angus Hereford Simmental Sim Angus program. It's a lot of fun, so
What as you're working with some of those young people at the beef unit, what are some of the challenges that you kind of tell them about or caution them about as they look to go into the real world or get a job in industry or something like that? What are some of the I guess things that you would not only share with your students but we can share with our listeners as well?
Yeah, great question, Garrett. I think the K-State's fortunate that it's the program there is very beef oriented. So there's a fair number of beef kids that come through, whether that's the pre-vet program or sort of more applied production focused kind of program. We have an advanced beef science class that actually Dave Nichols and Larry Cora have the day-to-day responsibilities for, but I get pulled into that class quite a bit, and that's one of the I don't have a teaching appointment formally, so that's one of the places where I get to interact with students a lot and get to know those are typically the students that are either going to vet school and real serious about large animal or food animal veterinary medicine, and typically from some kind of farming and ranching background, or folks that are going back to their families or some production unit. And it's fun because one of the things we talk about a lot, and sort of given my genetics predilections, is understanding sort of breed diversity and breed differences, breeding systems, all that stuff. And one of the things we talk a lot about is sort of the paradigm check, right? So do you understand as a producer the difference between what you perceive and actually the state of nature of what it is that you have? Because that influences management. And one of the things we use as an example is kind of cow size and lactation potential, because that's a big deal in Kansas in terms of making sure cows fit our production environment. And just understanding the difference between having an idea in our head and managing based on that versus managing based on data and information. And so the difference comes down to, do you think you have 1,200 pound cows, or do you know you have 1,200 pound cows, right? Because that ultimately how you manage them is how you perceive them.
Sure.
And so we spend some time doing some exercises like that, which is always a lot of fun and really eye opening for the really sharp students pick up on it really quick, and the game ends quickly. But it's always fun to interact with them and sort of test their biases, I guess is maybe a good way to describe it. And I think you guys know me a little bit, and so it's probably a surprise to you that I like to kind of challenge people's ideas and beliefs a little bit, and not to be adversarial, but to sort of point out that it's really important that we have our eyes open and that we're open to change and adaptation to changing market circumstance or whatever the case may be, and that plays a pretty big role. And ultimately, the students that leave, we want them to have a good technical background, but the most important thing is that they know how to think, right? And they know how to gather information, process information, have developed some habits in terms of where to go look for information, have good connections with people. One of the things I think is really important as an extension educator is that, all the students that are going back into production agriculture probably ought to know the state specialist in their species of interest, right?
Sure.
Because we're just down the hall, right? And so if I don't make a connection with those students,
Right.
I've missed a big opportunity to bridge a pretty substantial gap for them in terms of knowledge resources. And now, routinely there'll be a few of them that stop by. I'm not in the office much, but every once in a while somebody will stop by and say, "Hey, I was in, advanced beef science a couple of years ago." And it's refreshing to have that kind of interaction with students. And
I never really thought of it that way, but that is a good lesson for those of you who are in college. Make sure that you know your extension beef specialist, where you're going. And I know now that we're ranching in Kansas.
Yeah, you're Kansan now,
Yeah,
more or less, right?
Yeah.
Or at least your cows are Kansan.
Yeah, I know we've called on you a couple times, so
Yeah,
that connection's been good to have. Can you give us some of the people that have influenced you in your pedigree?
Great question.
And maybe some of the lessons that you've learned.
Yeah.
From
Try not to give Marty too much credit.
Right. Yeah, we'll keep. I can tell you some good stories on Marty Rupp. So, actually, Marty wasn't there when my wife and I started dating. He was close though. So, we'll tell a Marty Rupp story real quick, or part of a Marty Rupp story. So we were in Denver. I was working at Simmental, and we'd had a long day of board meetings, and DoubleTree Hotel in Denver's kind of for those of you that go to Stock Show, you'll know exactly where I'm talking about. And after the meeting, we'd retired for adult beverage, and I think if I remember right, the Avalanche was playing in the Stanley Cup, and so we were watching a little hockey on kind of off the side, and I was in graduate school, single at the time, and my then to be future wife was in the room, and I didn't know it right at the time, but she came over and we struck up a conversation, and the rest is history. But so if your parents tell you be careful about meeting women in bars, I knew her before that, but the point in time where our paths crossed again happened to be in a bar. But, so approach with caution, but there is opportunity, right? So, but the Marty connection was Tammy came over when Marty got up to go do something else. So
She was waiting for him to.
she was waiting for him to bug out, right? So I think she wanted to make sure there wasn't any confusion about what the target was. I don't know. But so other people though, influential people. Marty actually was he worked at Simmental when I joined the staff, and he and I've made great friendship over time, and worked together a lot through Simmental stuff, and one of the things I learned a lot about or from Marty was he's got an extensive background in the pig business, and just different perspective on sort of beef stuff, beef issues. And I think that was really valuable. And I think Marty's got a really intuitive sense of he's not trained as an animal breeder, but his animal breeding skills are good, and his intuition of data. I'm sort of guilty as a quantitative geneticist. My data filtering, data quality stuff is at a pretty high level, right? So I run genetic trends and percentile tables, and I mean, we all know that there's problems in the national cattle evaluation, but when there's 12 million animals in there, opening up the data file and going, it's that one, is pretty challenging, right? And so you rely a lot on other people's knowledge of, in fact, I wasn't really familiar with Simmental genetics when I went to work for Simmental, so I had to fix that quickly. And one of the ways you do that is find somebody that really understands what's going on and what bulls are being used, and who the targets are to go look at, and make sure things are either right or wrong. And so Marty has a really good. He was coordinating the. Their carcass merit program at the time, and so he had a lot of contact with data flow and data processing at Simmental. So he was really helpful in kind of bridging that gap of knowledge for me and teaching me some useful strategies to sort of be sensitive to that that stuff. Other people, so two or three actually that are still connected via Simmental. Jerry Lipsy was the exec and really influential. And I didn't know Jerry very well when I left Gelfie. He'd been on staff maybe a year and a half or two at Simmental, but by that time it already started. He and Marty together a really directional and fundamental change in that organization, and expanding a great track record of being data driven and science driven. And so I learned a lot from Jerry. Just as a young person, you can't be around Jerry Lipsy very long and not learn a whole bunch.
Right. And
we'd go on road trips together occasionally, and just really value Jerry's friendship and mentorship in that part of my life. And Steve McGuire's still at Simmental. He's kind of the head computer data processing guy. Still do a lot of work with Steve through some of my consulting work with other breeds. Really helped me learn a lot about just sort of big data management and data structures and all that stuff. Wade Schaefer. Wade actually came kind of right as I was leaving, and filled the role that I vacated when I left. But great leadership in the area of technology development and science for kind of continuing the legacy at Simmental in genetic evaluation and research stuff. So Wade's been a good friend and supporter too. Kind of other industry people that were really valuable to me. Jim Gibb. Jim's been he was kind of the guy that hired me for my first job, and good advice. Jim was really supportive of professional development opportunities for staff, and really did a great job mentoring young staff members at that organization. One of maybe the most important things I learned from Jim was and really helpful in breed association staff survival, if you will. And I think sometimes it's easy for staff to lose track of sort of the appropriate chain of command stuff. But Jim was always really good about articulating both to the board of directors, but also to staff that the communication between those groups was principally designed to be through, at least copied on him, right? So his role was pilot the ship, and everybody on the ship answered to him, right? They didn't answer to the board, they answered to him.
Yep.
That's the way the organization's designed to work. And of course the board has lots of input on policy, and staff's job is to implement that policy.
Right.
And in some ways staff, either formally or informally, can influence that policy, but they can't unilaterally develop it, right? So Jim was really good about managing sort of organizational structure, organizational communication, and I think there's oftentimes challenges in breed associations that are the result of people operating outside of that sort of formal organizational structure. And if you want to get your hind end in a ringer pretty quick, that's one way to do it. So as a young staff member, it became really valuable to me to kind of know how to manage those relationships between breeders, board members, other staff, board of directors. That was really valuable to me.
I think something Ben and I've talked about this a lot. It amazes me that the longer we get into our various careers, how important it is to be able to manage people as much as managing a project or something like that. Being able to deal with the different personalities and deal with the problems and deal with, but managing people is probably as valuable of a skill as anybody can have.
Absolutely.
And you definitely earn that. You don't just come out being able to do that right away. There's some lessons that have to be learned along the way.
And it's a really small world. If you want to if you want to live and work in beef production, it's a pretty small community of people, and you really don't want to burn those bridges, right? And so, effective professional communication skills, both written, verbal, all that is really important. It's teachable, but it's also very much a skill, and you need to practice it, and just like anything else.
Sure. Well, if you've got time, we would like to take a break right quick and dive more into some genomics type things. If you've got just a second. That'd be great. All right. Well, this will wrap up part one of our conversation with Bob Weber. If you will join back with us with our next episode as we dive more into genomics and get a little long-term advice from Bob. So thanks again for joining us, and we will be back shortly.
Hey friends, thanks for listening to this episode of the Beef Pros Podcast. We really enjoyed putting it together and hope you enjoy listening. We would love to have you stop by iTunes or Stitcher and give us a review. Also subscribe there. You can check out beefpros.com and get previous episodes and check out some pictures, and we'll be posting new things throughout the coming weeks and months. And you can also stop by our Facebook page, just search Beef Pros Podcast, and that'll get you right there. We love the feedback. Keep it coming, and let us know what you're looking for in future episodes. So share with your friends, subscribe, give us some feedback, and we really, really appreciate it.
Oh, right. Yeah, I forgot about that part. I'm Bob Weber, and I'm a beef pro.